Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the week 6 video for academic writing. I hope everybody's doing well up there. We're certainly getting deeper into this semester, and I really hope you are enjoying the experience so far, or at least finding it interesting and meaningful. And you're starting to put together some of the various different ideas that we've studied so far in this course. All right. We are continuing to learn all the necessary practical skills and concepts to improve our academic writing. As always, I want to remind you that the first half of this course, weeks 1 to week 8, we are cumulatively learning, thinking, and applying these skills and concepts as we move forward. All right, so what we learn in week 1, we need to think about, we need to consider, we need to apply to week 2, 1 and 2, we need to apply to 3, 1, 2, and 3, we need to apply to 4. Consider everything as we move on and try to increase our skills and knowledge and really try to apply that in this course. All right. Everything that we study in weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 will need to be demonstrated on the midterm, which is in week 8. And the little exercises and skills that we see in our notes here, though they are not part of our grade, they are part of our preparation for the midterm. The exercises and questions that you do each week will be very familiar to you on the midterm. All right, so keep that in mind. That is all the exercises and questions I'm giving you from week to week will need to be demonstrated in a similar fashion on the midterm. All right. Of course, all these skills and concepts are going to be doubly important when, after the midterm, we're going to really start to apply those skills directly into the writing of 2 essays. We have the longer term essay, which we will take about 6 weeks to do the writing process, from pre-writing, organization, rough draft writing, editing, peer editing, self-editing, and submitting the final draft much later in the course. It's going to be about 6 weeks to do that, okay? And then, of course, we have our second essay, which is the final exam. The final exam will be our second essay, all right? So, just to review, what we learned from weeks 1 to 7, okay, will need to be demonstrated on the midterm, and it will need to be applied in both our longer term essay and our second essay, the final exam. All right. I also want to remind you, as I have been many times, every week, at least twice, that it is never too early to really start thinking about a possible topic for the term essay. Okay? As I said, the term essay, the writing process, it doesn't need to be finished. We're going to begin the writing process in week 9. But the sooner you begin thinking about a possible topic for an academic persuasive essay, all right, that's what we're going to be writing. So you need to think of an appropriate topic for that term essay. And if you've already begun thinking about topics and reading and researching, great. If you haven't done that, at least start thinking about possible topics. All right, getting a head start now will mean that you're well prepared for week 9. Okay, because in week 9, that's where you really start to put things down, and we're going to move through the writing process. In week 9, I'm going to ask you to make an essay outline. Okay, not write an essay. The term essay doesn't need to be written in week 9, but the writing process begins in week 9 with pre-writing and essay outline. If you don't know what an essay outline is or how to write one, don't worry. We're going to look at that next week. Okay, but just get started thinking, and if you have the time and the ambition, start researching and reading and really starting to make yourself an expert on a possible topic. All right, so this week we are going to shift our focus to the important concept of appeals. Okay, when we talk about an appeal in an essay, here it's going to connect to something we studied earlier when we studied essential elements in writing. Okay, and that would be the element of development or adequate development. All right, so appeals, here we're going to get a little bit deeper into the concept of appeals and how it applies to development and to your writing to make you a better, more convincing writer, especially when we're dealing with persuasive essay. Although appeals are always important in all writing. Okay. Again, as I said, this is a cumulative course, so consider everything that goes into this. So call back or recall the information that we discussed when we talked about development. So if you don't know what development is, go and take a look at those notes again. But here we're going to dig a little bit deeper and talk about essay appeals. All right, so you should have the notes for this. I will have posted them in the Kakao chat room or on LMS. It's a relatively short note. I don't want this to get too complicated. I want to keep the concept as simple as I can and hopefully allow you to just understand the essential meaning behind and the importance of essay appeals. Okay, so when we're writing, if we're writing anything, especially an academic persuasive essay, always begin with these 3 simple questions. What are you writing? An academic persuasive essay. Why are you writing it? Okay, to persuade an audience and to hopefully achieve a decent grade in this course. And who are you writing it for? You're writing it for your classmates and your professor. So the setting here is an academic setting. All right. So just asking yourself those questions again will remind you of what your form is, what it is you're writing, your purpose, why you're writing it, and your audience, who you're writing it for. So that determines a lot about how you're going to write something. Okay, the form, the language, and importantly, like we'll talk about here today, appeals. So what is appeal then? Perhaps you're familiar with the English word appeal, appealing, right? If something appeals to you, it means you like it. You are attracted to it, okay? So this is very much the same idea, but within the development of an essay, all right? So appeal is how you, as a writer, connect to your readers in an effort to persuade them and therefore develop your essay in a way which the reader is attracted to your argument. And by attracted, I mean persuaded, convinced. They believe you, they trust you, they recognize that what you have to say is meaningful. Okay? Hopefully they will agree with you, but it's not necessary to understand your perspective in that way. Okay? Hopefully that can be accomplished, but again, that's not necessary. We just want to make sure that our arguments are reasonable and respectable, okay, especially in an academic persuasive essay. So, the basic forms of appeal are not new to writing. They're not new to rhetoric, which is the art of persuasion. If you listen to lawyers or politicians or teachers or anybody who is speaking or communicating you in a way that is trying to appeal to you, all right? These are techniques, strategies that have existed since human communication began. And even the formal discussion of appeals goes back to ancient times. Even the ancient Greeks were discussing these. And we can see that in the vocabulary that we're using here. So we're going to discuss the three basic forms of appeal, which are logos, pathos, and ethos. Okay, those are the old Greek forms of them. But you may recognize those words in modern English as well, right? Logos, you know what a logo is, or here, logic. Pathos, you may recognize the root there, path, sympathy, empathy, all right? And ethos, you might recognize, we do use that word in English, but ethics, all right? A certain kind of belief, and in this case, trust, all right? So these are the three things, the three different kinds of appeal that I want to study quite basically in this week's lecture, all right? As a side note here too, we could deal with the idea of fallacies and logical fallacies, especially when we're dealing with the appeal of logos, especially because we are writing academic writing. Okay, so for academic writing, we really need to be aware of logical fallacies. However, we could study a whole separate course on logical fallacies. We could spend a whole semester just focusing on logical fallacies. All right, you may have those courses in your philosophy department. I am not going to spend a lot of time talking about logical fallacies. I just want to emphasize to you that they are very important to how we make logos appeals. So in the notes, I have connected to a couple links for further information, and I strongly suggest that you at least read through and possibly make note of possible logical fallacies. All right, they will help you to become a better writer, especially for academic writing, by forcing you to improve and recognize critical thinking, all right, which is another very important aspect of academic writing. But it is quite complex, so I don't want to get deeply into it in this course, but I do want to, again, direct your attention to that. All right, so let's talk first about that appeal that I mentioned, logos. Okay, as I said, logos, you may recognize this word. This is an appeal to logic, which relies on reason. All right, and this is especially important to academic writing. So basically, it just means that what you are saying makes sense. All right, you're not trying to apply flowery language to your essay to try and win people over with your beautiful writing style. That's separate. But you know, some people without good, strong critical thinking might just use their language abilities to persuade you. Logos appeals is not that. Okay, logos is, cold, hard logic, right? 1 plus 1 equals 2. These are the kinds of things we want to establish, all right? Which is why I said critical thinking is very important. This is why understanding logical fallacies and being a logical thinker in that way can really help you to improve your academic writing ability. All right. But what it really boils down to is your argument. What is your thesis? Do you have a well thought out, strongly asserted thesis that is evidenced by precedents, okay, examples from the past, facts, statistics, expert testimony, and clear, specific, reasonable argumentation or basic explanation, right? So make sure the way you explain yourself is not only objective and true, but it's also clear, so there's no confusion there. All right. So again, logos, very important to academic writing. Make sure you can put forth clear arguments that are as objectively true as you can and avoid logical fallacies. And here, this might connect with all those polite reminders I keep giving you. Make sure that you make yourself an expert as much as you can on the topic that you're writing about. So this is why I keep encouraging you to begin thinking about a topic for your term essay now, and hopefully begin doing some reading, doing some research. And when you're doing your reading and research, don't focus just on the stuff that you believe in, right? That might lead to a cognitive bias. You're only focused on that which you agree with, or that which you believe in, or that which appeals to you. But if your topic is broad, and it should be broad enough to write, an appropriate academic persuasive essay, make sure you study as much of the field as you can, all right, to make yourself truly an expert on your topic and specifically on whatever thesis or main idea that you think you'll be working in the direction you go. All right, so that's basically logos, an appeal to logic or reason, and it's how you explain what your ideas are with critical thinking and clear explanation and appropriate evidence, right? So again, remember, appeals connects to the idea of development, one of those universal concepts of writing. And again, especially important in academic writing. All right, the next point to discuss, the next appeal is pathos. It's kind of the other hand of appeals here. I don't want to say it's quite the opposite of logos, but some might see it that way. All right, pathos, like I said, you may recognize the root word path, kind of feeling, right, in modern English words like sympathy or empathy or pathetic, all right? Those talk about how you connect feeling, right? If you have sympathy for someone, it means you can connect on an emotional level to that person's experience, all right? So pathos is an appeal to emotion, to the beliefs and feelings of the audience. All right, so again, keep in mind, as I said, who are you writing for? All right, so in this case, you are writing academic writing. So your audience is your professor or your colleagues or your classmates in the academic field. That is your audience. So for an emotional appeal to be successful, it must be appropriate to the topic, audience, and the argument. It must not misjudge readers' actual feelings. All right. And that's something that really comes with experience, knowing your audience and what they might be expecting from you. So be careful what you assume. All right. Don't assume to know the beliefs and feelings of your audience. But know that if you're writing a persuasive academic essay, they're going to have a certain expectation here. All right. You must be intellectually honest by not raising emotional issues that are irrelevant to the argument. Okay, so again, this really comes back to doing your research here too, right? Make sure you know all sides of an argument, because you can't give an intellectually honest or sincere argument if you are avoiding one section of history or of truth or knowledge in a field. You cannot avoid things, counter arguments, right? Or perspectives that are not in agreement with you. You can't avoid those just because you don't like them or they don't fit your thesis or your argument. Okay? To be successful at academic writing, especially persuasive writing or any persuasive writing, you have to be aware of the various different perspectives and different knowledge which might be conflicting. And you need to be able to handle that in a certain way. So make sure you do your research and make sure that you present yourself as being well read, okay? Because then you can more appropriately judge what an audience can find to be reasonable. All right. Now, typically pathos is more common in non-academic writing. All right. If you want to simplify this, academic writing is going to rely more on logos. Personal writing is typically going to rely more on pathos. Okay, but that doesn't mean that academic writing only uses logos and personal writing only uses pathos. All writing uses a mixture of both of these appeals. Okay, but typically academic writing leans toward logos. Okay, or should lean towards logos or logic, because that is what your audience is going to expect from academic writing. All right, and in a personal essay, the audience is probably going to expect more of you, the writer, and that includes more of your beliefs, which are usually influenced by your emotions there. Okay, so there's tendency here, but remember, all writing is going to include some sort of mixture of logos and pathos. All right. Also, what you want to do here is consider the tone of voice in your writing, especially the connotations, all right, the associations that people have with word choice. All right. Here, again, go back to what we studied in week 1, right? The use of language. All right. Remember, we're writing an academic persuasive essay. So, is it more effective to be serious or light or even humorous? All right. In the case of our class, where we're studying academic writing, we are going to focus more on our subject matter. objectively. We're going to focus on it with a fairly sincere and honest perspective. Okay, we don't need to be writing jokes in our academic persuasive essays. Where if you're writing a personal essay, that would be completely appropriate. Again, depending on your topic and tone. But consider how formal should your language be to best connect to the reader on that topic. All right. This understanding of your audience, all right, know who you're writing to, it really helps to build your ethos too, all right, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So you have to know what's appropriate for what you're writing, why you're writing, and who you're writing to. All right. So again, take a look at your use of language. Is it formal? Is it formal enough for what you're writing? All right. Also, you can use imagery and description, which might use more kind of pathos-based words. But be careful in how you choose those. But again, you have to be intellectually honest and sincere. If you are kind of using language that's a little too emotional in some of your adjectives or adverbs, you might be seen to trying to influence the reader in a non-objective kind of way. All right, and remember, academic writing should be objective from this point. All right, in least so far as it supports the facts. Okay, but find out what is appropriate. You're going to have to trust yourself, and you're going to have to learn from experience there. And again, that's where your knowledge of English language becomes important as well. Okay, but when we come to writing the term essay, hopefully through taking time over 6 weeks to really try to find the language, to write a rough draft, to have other classmates read it and give suggestions on our language as well as other aspects of the essay, we can hopefully improve on our language ability as well as, most importantly, our academic writing ability. Okay, so if that scares you a little bit now and you're a little bit worried about your language ability, these are things that we can address later, step by step, by following the writing process. But you should be aware of how your word choice affects the tone of your essay, which affects your pathos appeals. All right. So that will leave us with the third appeal, which is ethos. Okay. Ethos, again, you might find that word in ethics. And I think really the better word here to understand ethos as a persuasive rhetorical appeal in our writing is to consider ethos more about trust. Okay, how do we build the trust in the reader? How do we make the reader trust us and what we have to say and our research? Okay, that's what we're looking at. And ethos in many ways is developed through the combination of both logos and pathos. All right, so if you want to consider logos and pathos kind of opposites, ethos is what is the product of understanding how much logos we should rely on, how much pathos is appropriate. Okay, and understanding of that is really what helps to develop ethos as well. So the trust that is developed by the writer is really comes from proving that he or she is a fair, competent, rational thinker, and one with expertise, understanding, or knowledge of all perspectives of that subject. They're not, they don't have blinders on. They're not focused only on their own beliefs. They are aware of the various perspectives and knowledge on the field or the topic on which they're writing. And they are also open and honest about the variety of emotions that come into these arguments, if that's possible, depending on the topic, or how that is possible, depending on the topic. All right. So consider that. All right. That's kind of the basic understanding of ethos here. It is how you can make the reader trust you by using logos appropriately, by using pathos appropriately, and by understanding your topic as clearly as you can, or as deeply as you can. All right, so that means sometimes that a writer may even concede or recognize other points of view that are in conflict with their argument, whether it be their thesis or supporting points, right? That is perfectly acceptable to say, well, I believe this, but there is this idea and this idea and this idea that disagree with what I have to say. Okay, that is why I brought up, if you go back to, I think, week 2 or week 3, when we talked about the structure and definition of an essay, that many academic essays also include a section called the refutation. And that refutation is where you concede, right, or you acknowledge that there are opposing points of view or perspectives that challenge your perspective. So you're open to and aware of the wide knowledge and perspectives and vast perspectives on your topic. All right. And if you can demonstrate that in your writing, that helps to make the reader trust you, because you are an expert and you're aware of these various aspects, whether they be factual or emotional. All right. So keep that in mind. And as I said before, an ethical writer is an intellectually honest or sincere writer. One that does not use inappropriate emotional appeals, but rather develops a sincere and appropriate tone. All right. So a sincere and appropriate tone for an academic persuasive essay is one that can offer pathos, but the pathos really is influenced by the logic. All right. So I don't think you want to get it the other way around. Don't let your pathos influence your logic. Make sure your logic influences your pathos arguments. All right. That would be considered more sincere. All right. All right. We also, again, need to consider English here. Not only, your English language ability, but here I mean all of your language skills, which include many of the writing skills that I am teaching in the first half of this course that I really want you to consider and apply and hopefully improve at through experience and consideration. All right. So not only is an ethical writer intellectually honest and uses the appropriate tones, but they need to demonstrate that through the writing, which includes the use of language, the appropriate use of language. For example, in academic writing, your use of jargon. Okay, jargon is vocabulary that is specific to a certain topic. Okay, if you're a lawyer, you use a lot of lawyer words. Okay, they use a lot of Latin phrases. Okay, that's part of legalese, they call it, lawyer language. Okay, doctors might use more scientific language too. Like if you're talking about certain diseases, they might use the academic word there, okay, rather than the common words. So again, knowing your audience and knowing what you're writing and why you're writing should help you to choose the most appropriate language. Okay, so you can also demonstrate your knowledge on a topic by having knowledge of that vocabulary in academic writing. On top of using the right language, even the grammar and structure and conventions, writing conventions or communicative conventions, help to develop your ethos. All right. So again, using appropriately formal language in academic writing is important. And also, right, this is why we spend a lot of time editing. We want to get rid of as many grammar mistakes and punctuation mistakes and format errors on how you publish your paper, to make sure that when the reader is reading it, it looks polished, it looks professional, it looks like an expert wrote it, okay, or somebody that is competent. Because it's really hard to trust someone who lacks basic language and writing competency or skills. All right. So just think about it. If you went and bought a book and it was full of spelling and punctuation errors, you would probably find it hard to not only read it, but to trust that the writer has something important to say. Right now, your essay might be the same, right? You might have some of the most remarkably intelligent ideas in the essay, but if you don't take the time to communicate those ideas properly by demonstrating the appropriate form of an academic persuasive essay, by not taking the time to choose the right tone and formality in your language, if you make a lot of spelling and grammar mistakes, we are going to judge you differently, right? Either you don't care or you don't know about these appropriate things, and that really hurts your ethos appeal. Okay, so that's another aspect of developing ethos. Not only knowing how to appropriately judge the use and application of logos, logic, and pathos, feeling, but all the other aspects of understanding what you're writing, why you're writing, who you're writing to, and everything that goes into the use of language and your use of language are necessary to develop your ethos. And by developing your ethos, therefore persuade your reader that what you have to say is meaningful and should be appreciated and respected, if not completely believed. Okay, if you even if you don't convince your reader, because some readers will never be convinced on certain aspects. I'm sure you know those people. But you can still respect and trust a writer if they demonstrate these three aspects of appeal: logos, pathos, and ethos. All right, so that is really kind of a basic explanation of these three important appeals. Let's take a little bit of time here just to look at a very simple example, which hopefully kind of wraps up all three here. All right. So, as it says in the notes, an essay will potentially use all of these appeals, but in different ways. Again, according to what you're writing, why you're writing, who you're writing it to. An academic essay, as I mentioned before, will rely more heavily on logos, while a personal essay typically will be more reliant on pathos. But as a writer, again, ask yourself those three important questions. And remember that your appeal should match your thesis, your main idea, and your development, okay? Your body, your supporting ideas. Okay, that there's a relationship there that you need to pay attention to. So let's look at this little example here, just a couple sentences, and see if you can identify how these appeals work. All right, so short paragraph, I think it's just 3 sentences. All right, sentence 1. Advertising should show more physically challenged people. Sentence 2. The hundreds of thousands of disabled Canadians have considerable buying power. Okay, buying power means they have a lot of money to buy consumer goods, products. Yet so far, so far advertisers have made no attempt to tap that power. So advertisers are avoiding many or thousands, hundreds of thousands of disabled Canadians. Further, by keeping the physically challenged out of the mainstream depicted in ads, advertisers encourage widespread prejudice against disability, prejudice that frightens and demeans those who hold it. All right, so let's examine these 3 sentences. I hope you understand them well enough. And we'll see how, in fully developing an argument, we're going to rely on logos appeals, pathos appeals, and ethos appeals as well. So the first sentence here is a clearly worded statement. It's an assertion. All right, that sounds reasonable, but requires evidence. Okay, so you might read that sentence: advertising should show more physically challenged people. Okay, that's somebody's opinion, and it's kind of their idea. And you can say, well, that sounds reasonable, but is it? I don't know. I am skeptical. Prove it to me. All right. So that needs to be developed. So how do we develop it? All right, adequately. And how can we appeal to the reader? The second sentence makes a logos appeal. It says, the hundreds of thousands of disabled Canadians have considerable buying power, yet so far advertisers have made no attempt to tap that power. All right, so an appeal to logic. Why should advertisers try to attract more buying power from physically challenged people? Because they have a lot of money. All right. This is not an appeal to emotion. This is an appeal to logic. The job of an advertiser is to draw attention to products so that people spend more money on them. All right. So it is quite rational, logical, reasonable to say, if this is true, disabled people have a lot of money. If you advertise, they will spend their money on you. Okay, so that is a logical appeal. All right, the next sentence says, further, by keeping the physically challenged out of the mainstream depicted in ads, advertisers encourage widespread prejudice against disability, prejudice that frightens and demeans those who hold it. Right here, we're not relying on the facts of of how much money they have. We're talking about how physically challenged people are depicted, are held in esteem in society. And if we, as a society, ignore physically challenged people, what is the effect there? All right, and this is appealing to we, the readers, as human beings. It's appealing to our emotion. All right. So the idea is that if we ignore physically challenged people, then it prejudices them. All right, it ignores them, it excludes them from society. All right, and that's incorrect. So again, go back to the first statement. Advertising should show more physically challenged people. Okay, why should advertising show more physically challenged people? Because by acknowledging them and representing them on TV or in advertisement, we are welcoming them, or hopefully making them feel more welcome within society. All right, and that is good for society from an emotional aspect, not an economic, kind of logical, rational reason. Okay, but it still helps to develop the first sentence, the main idea of this paragraph. All right, and keep in mind in that last sentence, we are making a pathos argument. The use of language here, okay, we get words like frightens and demeans. All right, those are appropriately in tone they're appropriate in tone for this kind of pathos argument. All right, they're strong verbs that really get to our emotions. Case fear and demean or put down. All right, almost insult. Right, those are again feeling words. Okay, so they are appropriate for a pathos appeal. So we have both of these sentences, one logos appeal, and one pathos appeal, which both go to support the main idea, which is advertising should show more physically challenged people. All right, so what about ethos? Well, look at how ethos is developed here. Why should we say, well, you know what, this is convincing or this is persuasive, right? This is a well-constructed, well-developed, unified paragraph. We have a clear main idea and we have two supporting ideas which are intellectually honest and use the appropriate emotional tone. So those aspects really help to develop our trust. I believe this writer, I trust this writer is being sincere and reasonable. All right, and of course, the construction, the structure of the paragraph is coherent and cohesive. Right, go back to what we studied last week and the week before. Right, it is well developed. As well, and it uses the appropriate language, especially in the pathos appeal. All right, and of course, it is free from grammatical errors and spelling, etc. All those aspects. So I do trust the reader's intellectual ability. I trust their emotional understanding, and I also trust their skills as a writer to construct well-written paragraphs. Okay, so check, check, check. Ethos achieved. All right. So I hope this helps to demonstrate these three basic appeals of logos, pathos, and ethos. They go back a long time in history, and they are incredibly important to persuasive writing. And remember, in this course, we are going to be writing persuasive academic essays. So make sure you understand how these are used and how they are appropriately used. All right, to help you out with that, I have offered some further links that you can get into. They will cover what I said here, basically, but you can read them in other people's words with a little bit of extra detail, perhaps, that may strengthen your learning. Also, keep in mind the first link here does have, I think the second link, excuse me, using rhetorical strategies for persuasion at the Purdue University Writing Lab website. They get into the logical fallacies, which I mentioned earlier, which are really important, but they're quite complicated. So I do highly recommend that you at least read through and try to understand in basics what logical fallacies are, especially the common ones, and how to avoid them. That really will improve your critical thinking ability, which will necessarily improve your writing ability, especially when it comes to logos appeals, which is especially important to academic writing. All right, so that is all for this week. All right, again, I hope everybody is up to date and following along in this course. There's a lot of information, and we're trying to add to that information, those skills and concepts every week up to the midterm, where you will have to demonstrate those skills. And again, one more time, please begin thinking about possible topics for your term essay. If not that, if you want to be even better, go ahead and really get into research and reading to try and make yourself as much of an expert on your topic and understand all the various perspectives about your topic and knowledge that you can. That will make you very well prepared for when we begin the writing process in week 9. Okay? All right. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, maybe you need clarity on what we're doing or why we're doing it, please feel free to contact me. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Take care, everybody.